Oh, hi, and happy holidays, everyone. This has been a very special few weeks for me with the release of Tattletale Sounds. It's my book on the building, career, loss, and exploration of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I've been, well, quite frankly, humbled by the sales of this deep dive into the Great Lakes' most famous ship, but it's your feedback that's even more valuable to me. With 4 really great books available on the Fitz, I wanted to make sure I brought out new information, which is tough with a story that's nearly 50 years old. For those of you who have watched my documentaries, can you believe there have been 3 now? You know they're the only ones with video on the construction of the Fitzgerald. But the highlights for me were meeting the men who put the freighter together. Tattletale Sounds is different in this way, with the most detailed chapter available on the building of what was the largest freshwater boat ever constructed, complete with comments from 3 men who did the work. I also have investigated the company that put $8 million into the Fitzgerald and why Northwestern Mutual was so interested in shipping, from their fleet of ships to the amazing maritime legacy of the Fitzgerald family. The ship that carried Edmund Fitzgerald's name had an incredible career, but it didn't start out that way. I share the breakdowns during the shakedown, and even on her maiden trip to Silver Bay. I also outline her cargo hauling records, even after it was no longer the largest ship on the lakes. How did the Fitzgerald do it? I explain it in chapters 5 and 6. I've been lucky to interview 3 former mates on the Fitz, as well as the last permanent cook on board. Red Bergner's story has become a legend in itself, and I share my exclusive interview with him. Was the keel loose? Well, I have the company drawings right here, and comments from the Coast Guard that actually investigated the allegations.
Okay, when it hits the bottom, someplace in this passage down, taconite starts spilling forward.
Speaking of famous captains, I have to acknowledge the one interview I wish I'd done, but I have thanks to the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society. Captain Bernie Cooper's heroism is celebrated in the book, but his reluctance and even anger over the ships that didn't look for the Fitz are equally captivating.
I still thought it was an exercise in futility with what had happened, with the sudden disappearance. He had to be on the bottom with no maydays or anything. And then, of course, then afterwards, you felt a little bit bigger when those 3 saltwater boats wouldn't alter their course even to go over and take a look.
The cutter Woodrush spent some 20 hours crossing a stormy Lake Superior to search for survivors. I'll share my interview with Captain Hobaugh and other crewmen who were aboard.
Normally in the ocean, you can either pitch or roll. Out there, you pitched and rolled at the same time, and she would just snap on you.
Tattletale Sounds is the only book with a squadron that located Fitzgerald by magnetometer. You'll meet the Lion Squadron and find out the Navy flew 2 missions to locate the Fitz. 4 of the aircrew were interviewed for details on the Orion flights. Much has been written on the Coast Guard investigation, but I share insight from 3 hours I spent with Captain Wilson, who was on that board. The captain just recently passed away, and I'm so lucky I not only had the interview with him, but he was also at my lecture in Royal Oak in 2021.
I was relieving the first mate, but the way they do that, and it makes sense too, is the second mate goes up to first mate, and the relief guy is always the third mate, see, no matter who you're relieving.
Captain Dick Orgel's testimony made the most headlines during the inquiry. But how did they find him? Chapter 13 shares how a Detroit lawyer found the former mate of the Fitz, and how it bring quick resolution to lawsuits filed against Ogilvy Norton. Chapter 14 is dedicated to the theory of 6 Fathom Shoal, and you'll want to read my take on it. I've not only talked with a member of the Bayfield that went looking for the shoal, but also share my eyewitness visit to the wreck site to get to the bottom of the bottoming out myth.
Well, there it is. Shoot that. Number 1. How about that?
That is hatch cover number 1 down into the coaming.
When the Coast Guard put curve on the Fitz, they recorded their observations on videotape. Tattletale Sounds is the first to use those recordings to put you right alongside the investigators. When Cousteau came to the Great Lakes, it was to highlight pollution problems with a dive to the Fitz to bring public attention to the program. Gordon Lightfoot's song had reached number 2 on the charts, and the dive was highlighted in their documentary. But what did they see? And where else did Calypso go? I have the complete itinerary in Chapter 18. I also share behind-the-scenes commentary from the 1989 Sea Grant dive with a 3D robot. 3 members of the crew talk about the dive, including the open pilot house door they found.
I don't want to go in.
Chapter 20 is all about Harbor Branch Oceanographic's visit to the wreck. Allegations that the crew brought up some of the cargo are spelled out, and the story wasn't the one I'd heard from a team member years ago. Interviewing the father-son duo of subpilots on Clelia was a highlight for me, and it's even more detailed than what was in Dr. McGinnis's book, Fitzgerald's Storm. Discoveries that haven't been talked about in any other book are highlighted in Tattletale Sounds.
That's the gantry. I think they slide along the wreck that lifts the hatch covers and sets them over.
Yeah.
The location of the hatch crane, Curve's investigation of the crushed first hatch, a knotted line on the skeg, and the steward's crane resting on the prop, all complete with photos and commentary from the people who found it.
Yeah, but it looked like that was.
The most controversial dive to the Fitzgerald happened right after Harbor Branch returned to the ocean. Expedition 94 brought in the Delta submersible, which recorded footage of a body found on the bottom near the bow of the wreck. Was it one of the missing 29 men? I share candid commentary from those on the expedition and my thoughts behind the scenes of my documentary that was banned by the state of Michigan. The most expensive dives to the Fitzgerald brought the Bell to the surface, and I share technical details about the 2 submersibles used to record the wreck in high definition. I also share the newt suit that cut the Bell free from the wreckage. More interviews than all of the books on the Fitzgerald combined, written by someone who's actually been down to see the wreck, and a complete index for researchers to find details quickly. I also include the written testimony of Captain Cooper, Anderson, and First Mate Morgan Clark, the last man to talk to Captain McSorley. Tattletale Sounds is the only source to read the radio search of the Fitzgerald, and the only book to reveal the wreck may be partially in American waters. You'll also get a complete list of places the ship visited in 1975, and my insight into why the last trip wasn't to its usual port at Silver Bay. Whew! Does it live up to the hype? Only you can decide that. I admire each of the authors who have preceded Tattletale Sounds, and like all the expeditions, there's something new in each book. But if you're looking for details, might I suggest this one? Tattletale Sounds, at your favorite maritime museum, or look for it at lakefury.com.